Hello, everyone. Hi. I would like to extend a really warm welcome to all of you tuning in to my LinkedIn Live today on the topic of what is our COVID-19 endgame. Just to introduce myself, my name is Juliana Chan, and I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Wildtype Media Group. We publish Asia's leading science magazine, asianscientist.com. So I'm joining you live from Singapore, and it is a really special week for all of us here, as yesterday, Singapore relaxed its COVID-19 measures, including removing the mask mandate outdoors, allowing more people to dine together, and, of course, not forgetting live music. So I'd like to introduce to you our guest speaker today, Dr. Juan Carlos Jaramillo. Juan Carlos is the Chief Medical Officer of French biotech Valneva, which is creating vaccines for infectious diseases with significant unmet medical need. He has a strong background in vaccine clinical development, medical affairs, and global market access, and he currently leads the development programs of vaccines for Valneva for Lyme disease, chikungunya, and COVID-19. So I'm just going to bring him up right now. Hello, Juan Carlos. Welcome. How are you doing?
Hi, Juliana. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. And yourself?
Very good. I'm of course, in a very good mood given the relaxation of social distancing measures and mask mandate. So, today I'm looking forward to us chatting about the innovations in vaccine technologies and global health that will help us transition, hopefully, into a COVID-19 endemic world. To all of you joining us today, if you have any questions for me and Juan Carlos, please enter them into the comments section at the bottom of the screen, and I'll pull them up along the way. Shall we get started, Juan Carlos?
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right, let me see. Please, just leave in any comments. I'll pull them up as you go. I see some comments already starting. Hello, everyone. All right, Juan Carlos, you're chatting with us live today from Bahrain. Could you share with us what brings you to the Middle East? Is there any good news that you would like to share with us?
Yes, actually, I'm in the transit to Bahrain. Today, I'm in Dubai as I have some meetings with some KOLs on VLA 2001, but also with other Valneva products. But actually, I'll be traveling this evening to Bahrain to attend the ceremony as we will be delivering the first VLA 2001 batches to the Bahrainian government, which they will start using it in their COVID-19 vaccination.
Wow, that's amazing. I hope you have a good trip to all the way, and I know you're in transit in a hotel right now. So thanks for joining us today. Juan Carlos, of course, I'm based in Singapore. I'm born and bred here. I know you also have a bit of working experience with Asia, and also, interestingly enough, a previous pandemic. So could you share with us a little bit about your relationship with Asia? And if you can share with us what you've learned from the previous pandemics and what you've brought to COVID-19.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start off with the good things. I had the opportunity to, back in 2008, to join GlaxoSmithKline Vaccines Group. And at that time, I was leading the flu vaccine portfolio. And I had the opportunity to travel to Asia Pacific, Singapore being one of the countries where I really enjoyed it very much. I had the opportunity to spend there almost 2 months as the company also started creating more resources in order to make sure that GSK was at that time present in the region. One of the things that I've always remember from Singapore was the zoo, which was fantastic. It was one of my first places that I attended when I was there. But then I would say the second most was the street food. I still remember the great cuisines. From eating perspective, I mean, it's fantastic. Everywhere you go, great people, great food. One of the best cities that I've ever been to, and I think I really enjoyed my time, and hopefully I see myself going back there again very quickly.
We'd love to have you here. You've also had experience working in Asia and also working on a previous pandemic. Could you share with us some of those stories?
Yes. So coming back to my time at GSK back in 2009, as you all aware, we had what we call the swine flu, the H1N1. GSK was one of the leading companies to start developing a vaccine, and which we finally were able to commercialize it with the name of Pandemrix. At that time, I was responsible for Europe, where my main focus was the clinical development for that vaccine. Of course, once the product was approved, we had the opportunity to distribute it globally, and I believe that was a key achievement.
We were talking about Asia, which is my favorite topic. I'm also interested with your work with the Ben Geek Foundation. I know that Valneva does some work with Thailand, right?
Yes, we've been very fortunate, and of course, this was way before my time. But I do believe that Valneva has had a presence working with the Ben Deck Foundation, with now for 6 years. Which really, this foundation is aiming, and it provides vulnerable children and their family to much needed education, health and family services. And this is something that we're very proud here at Valneva, because again, it also gives us a footprint and where we can provide some support and to the Asia Pacific community.
You know, Juan Carlos, as much as I'm happy about the loosening of the mask mandates in public places and more relaxed travel rules, you know, I do want to ask myself, are we going to see yet another surge in COVID-19 infections in places as densely populated as Asia? You know, is this going to be a slow-moving train wreck? Are we just going to see another surge in the next 6 to 12 months? Do you have any thoughts on that, given that you've seen another pandemic and, of course, you're thinking about this all the time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Juliana. I think what's happening now, of course, I think there is a pandemic fatigue from a lot of individuals, and especially also a lot of governments. But again, science at the end of the day will prevail. You know, one of the things that we've seen various surges again of the COVID-19 is that we see the emergence of more infectious variants like Delta and Omicron. And I do believe that, for example, the A2, which is the subvariant of the Omicron, has shown to be more untransmissible. And that's, I do believe, why the wave or the spikes in infections have risen up. Right now, I guess the question would be is when would it occur? Some epidemiologists and some scientists says that it'll probably be after the summer holidays, once we go again during autumn and winter. But again, that's something that not only Valneva is keeping a close eye on it, but I think the rest of the world, to see how do we make sure that we could continue to combat this COVID-19 situation.
Well, I'm certainly hopeful, of course. I really hope that this is the light at the end of the tunnel for us in Singapore. It's been 2 long years, and I'm ready to have a little bit, let my hair down, have a little bit of fun, of course, responsibly. You know, I want to talk about some case studies. I've been reading a lot about, before our chat today, about some countries and their track record. So in Hong Kong, there has been a surge in cases, and it was not very pleasant. It had recently reported the world's highest death rates from COVID over a 7-day period. And people think it's due to its low vaccination rate in the vulnerable elderly population. So, you know, concurrently, there's also had been a surge in New Zealand and other parts of Asia, of course, and Australasia. But New Zealand, however, kept its hospitalization and death rates rather low, in part due to its high vaccination rates of 95%. So it goes to show that, you know, vaccination does play a very significant part in protecting a country and keeping its death rates low. What would you say, or what would you describe to be a good vaccination and booster strategy in general?
Yeah, no, it's a great question again. So coming back to that case study that you're mentioning, and it's true. I mean, if we look at the mortality rates due to the new COVID-19 spike remain relatively low in most of the nations that were preventing implementations like the zero COVID policy. So Hong Kong did, and as correctly said, reported, I believe, the world's highest COVID-19 death rates over the 7-day period. But I do believe, and there is literature out there, that the major reasons for that large number of hospitalizations and deaths in Hong Kong is to the low vaccination rates in the vulnerable older population. As you mentioned, New Zealand, where it has had more than 95% of vaccine coverage, we didn't see that number of hospitalizations and or death, even in the elderly. So again, I think from a booster perspective, the most important part is that we continue with the vaccination campaigns, especially in the elderly and the vulnerable. And that's it's something that we will see more and more. VLA 2001, we have shown positive homologous data from our phase 1, phase 2 earlier this year. And we are planning to provide top-line results for our homologous and heterologous results from our pivotal phase 3 trial, the COVE Compare, which we were looking at results in homologous setting, vaccinating individuals who had been primed with VLA 2001 and individuals who had been primed with the AstraZeneca vaccine, which we used in our phase 3 trial.
Just to clarify, when you say homologous, you mean the same vaccine all the way, including booster, and heterologous, you mean like, kind of a mix and match strategy.
Correct.
Is that what you mean?
Correct.
So
very good. Yes.
I just want to pick up on that. I do agree, and I've read, and that's what caused me to take a mix and match booster strategy as well. There have been studies that show that rather than focusing on a vaccination program that gives additional doses of the same vaccine that someone has had before, a mix and match approach is better and more efficacious. Is that true? How much do we know about this?
Well, currently there is a lot of trials and data out there, and actually there are a lot of governments and vaccine task force that have requested specific data for Valneva, and especially with our COVID-19 program. We are looking in implementing heterologous booster studies, which we plan to initiate very soon. As I mentioned, we will have the first set of data from our VLA 2001-301 phase 3 program very soon. But I think that's one of the things that I believe that VLA 2001 in our homologous setting, we were able to show that we had great memory response from immunogenicity perspective. So once more data starts coming out, we will be able to show the importance of VLA 2001 in a mix and match setting.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. I see some questions already coming up. I just want to assure all of you that we will go through most of them, as many as we can. So please keep them coming. I'll get to them later. Juan Carlos, I want to talk about a topic that, as a science communicator, is quite close to my heart, and that is convincing the public to be vaccinated. So while we have seen widespread vaccination, very, very high numbers and percentages, we have also seen quite a fair bit of vaccine skepticism and vaccine hesitancy. In my circle, there are people who are truly afraid of getting mRNA vaccines. I think some of the concerns are that it's a very new type of vaccine. It hasn't been tested before until now, and that they do not know the long-term effects of these vaccines. And in some cases, I've talked to parents, they don't mind getting the mRNA vaccines, but they themselves don't want their children to be getting mRNA vaccines. So what can we do in this instance? I know VLA 2001 isn't an mRNA vaccine. Could you share with us more about the details of the vaccine and what we should think about when we think of VLA 2001?
No, it's again for us. I mean, we have to realize that different companies have taken different approaches to developing a COVID-19 vaccine, especially including the new technologies. And you rightly stated, Juliana, that when things are new, people are more hesitant to really understand or at least accept the new technology. Of course, more data is needed and to look at the long-term potential effects, but until we don't have that data in place, we're not going to be able to really, I would say, address those vaccine hesitant individuals. What we do believe, and this is why Valneva believes that everyone should have access to every technology available, and that's why we moved ahead and using our platform for inactivated vaccines, the similar one that we use for our Japanese encephalitis, Ixiaro. We then started developing VLA 2001, which is an adjuvanted vaccine with two adjuvants, CpG 1018 and also alum. Knowing the technology of inactivated vaccines have been around for more than 70 years, there is a lot of safety usage. For example, in Ixiaro, we've been commercializing it for the last 10 years. We've administered more than billion doses. So we're very confident on that this technology can be a suitable tool for individuals that are a bit hesitant for these new either VLPs or mRNA vaccines.
Sounds good. I'm just going to pull up some comments from the audience. I just thought this might be relevant for my next question. This is from Richard. I'm not going to pronounce your surname. I don't want to get it wrong. But Richard says the current vaccines available are mainly based on the original variant and also Delta, which is a more dangerous version. Now that the Omicron variant seems to be taking over, especially BA2 subvariant, are the vaccines available still efficient? I think this is also a question that I want to ask Juan Carlos, because in spite BA2 being the one that's causing all the surges across Asia, there could be yet another variant or subvariant appearing. How can we prepare for all of this?
Yeah, so for us, I think, especially with the scientific community, the most important is that we continue to track and test individuals who have COVID symptoms. I think one of the important things is to make sure that we were able to identify quickly new subvariants. It's true that the current vaccines right now are based on the ancestral strain. But VLA 2001, we have been able to show in laboratory testing that we have very good cross protection against Delta and Omicron. And of course, once we have additional new subvariants that have been identified, Valneva will make every effort to also test our vaccines against that neutralization.
All right. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Juan Carlos. I think no conversation about Asia is complete without discussing China. I'm sure you agree. And currently, 2 years later, it is still on a COVID-19 elimination or a zero COVID strategy. And, it announced very recently, I think maybe today or yesterday, its biggest citywide lockdown, with Shanghai locked down in 2 stages over 9 days. Oh, I see a comment from Sha'an. She says Shanghai has also entered lockdown today. Well, there you go. How can China and countries that are adopting a COVID-19 elimination strategy ever open their borders safely?
So, I mean, first of all, we need to address, and I would say just specify that let's say, what we call zero COVID policy or COVID elimination strategy, I think worked very well for the first 12 to 18 months. As I mentioned before, having the new variants that are more transmissible is creating some issues for these strategies. I think now they're moving more toward mitigation. And I think one of the things that China and other countries have done extremely well is this mass testing. Again, here they're able to at least minimize the spread, first of all, but also look at minimizing the hospitalizations and deaths that may be caused by these new variants. I think we will see over time on how these zero COVID policies can or may be potentially able to work in the future. But it comes back to what we mentioned before, Juliana, is that vaccination and boostering will continue to be needed in order to at least minimize the amount of hospitalizations and death with any new type of variant that might be out there.
Well, let me just hide this comment. I can find it. So, I think all I can say is it is quite a mammoth task to lock Shanghai down. That's where my parents and their parents were from. So I wait to see what happens next, as will the rest of the world. Before I open up to the audience entirely, please keep your comments coming. I want to ask you, very broadly speaking, what are the technologies that we need to invent or have already invented or in the process of inventing to eradicate SARS-CoV-2? And is that even possible? What do we need to do right now?
I mean, currently, right now, the thinking around eradication of COVID-19, I believe, and what I've seen from various discussions and also literature out there, is that we will not be able to see that. I do see COVID-19 going more in the endemic phase, hopefully like a flu-like situation. And coming back to flu, I think one of the things from a vaccinology perspective, and also what a lot of vaccines companies have tried to do in the past, is to develop and bring to market a universal, for example, universal flu vaccine. I think we're still lacking some development strategies in order to accomplish this. But we do see that with this pandemic, with COVID-19, there's been major steps in that direction. But again, I don't see yet a full eradication. So, for example, as we've done with polio, I do see again COVID-19 going more into the endemic. The questions will always be around, what would be the appropriate vaccine in the future, and this is something that if we had a crystal ball strategy, it's very difficult for us to identify what that would be.
All right, on that note, I did read that I did read an article about wastewater detection. Apparently, there are very many technologies out there to detect shedding of viral RNA in the wastewater, and often it can be detected earlier than people start to show symptoms. So you can even see a spike before the spike happens. I found that to be quite fascinating, and I hope they develop more in that area.
Yeah, that's correct, Juliana. I think this came out of where the U.S. Was actually looking at the spikes of COVID infections in Europe, and they were able to look at it's like you said, detecting mRNA viral particles in the wastewater and anticipate any future outbreaks in specific communities throughout the U.S.
All right, Juan Carlos, I'm actually going to start getting feedback from the audience. I know there's some questions already. Please keep them coming. I've got lots of time. Let's go. If you have anyone in mind, you can, Juan Carlos, I can also pull that up. Okay, I like this one. This is a global health public policy challenge. LinkedIn user, unknown, anonymous, says, what's the biggest issue when it comes to vaccine distribution to lower income countries? Is it logistics, funding, etc.? Juan Carlos.
So looking at, you also need to look at the platform and the technology. If you look at VLA 2001 inactivated vaccines, I mean, from a transportation perspective and storage, these vaccines are stored between 2 to 8 degrees.
That's right.
So again, I think it's very important also to look from a logistical perspective of what those countries have, if they have the right or the appropriate infrastructures. And the other thing, I think, of course, around resources and from an economical perspective, that's always something that even though the WHO, COVAX, CEPI organizations are trying to make sure that low income middle countries have access to it. It's just a slower process, and this comes back to what we were discussing before. We might be able to move COVID-19 to an endemic phase in some regions or some countries, but we will always have specific outbreaks in areas where vaccination has not been implemented fully, for example. So again, I think we need to watch and be very mindful on how can we support from a public health perspective in order to low class middle income countries to have the appropriate vaccines, whatever technology that can be delivered to them.
Yeah, I mean, the cold chain issue, sub-zero conditions are going to be probably one of the most challenging supply chain issues when sending some of these vaccines to the developing world. I've got a question from Jaron, and this is a booster question. Do you foresee regular booster shots being part of a normal life, open inverted commas, moving forward with COVID-19? I do scan a little bit of social media from time to time, and I noticed that people have gotten a little bit jaded with the booster concept. Like, some people have said, I'm done with it. And others are, fine, I'll get and there are memes about it, like I'm going to get my 8th booster shot, 9th booster shot, or 100th booster shot. Is this going to be a part of our everyday life, like the flu vaccine, to have it annually or biannually?
So it's still, I think it's a bit early to say if COVID-19 booster shot will be done on an annual perspective. There are people that saying that we probably see booster every 6 to 8 months. Some individuals are saying can be every 12 months, can be every 18 months. Again, it all depends on the vaccine technology, first of all, but also on the durability of the immune system. And this is something that we are still looking into it, especially looking at specific T cells and correlating that with the disease severity and clinical outcomes. So for right now, for me, at least from my opinion, it's a bit too premature to answer that question around what would be the time frame of when a booster will need it. What we are seeing now is that with the licensed vaccines, the durability of protection can be anywhere between 3 to 5 months max.
Maximum.
One of the things,
Did you
yeah,
just say 3
maximum,
months?
exactly.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So one of the things that we are doing at Valneva and with VLA 2001, when we reported our homologous booster data, we boosted these individuals between 7 to 8 months. Of course, it was a small sample size, around 77 individuals, but we will be able to confirm the durability of VLA 2001 once we show and provide data for VLA from our phase 3 program, hopefully in the next couple months.
So, I'm just scanning through some of the questions. I'm going to ask, I see we have a lot of questions from our scientific and healthcare audience. Some medical writers are here too. I'm just going to pull up some questions from a scientist in the crowd, Wei Jie Po. Hi, Juan Carlos. Any thoughts on antibody-dependent enhancement with future SARS-CoV-2 variants? And how is the vaccine field addressing this potential risk? Any thoughts on that?
Yes. So, no, it's a very good question. I think that question comes around because of what we've seen in previous, for example, vaccines against RSV. So for right now, there has been quite a lot of animal studies. And also that is something that we are monitoring, not only Valneva, but also other companies from a safety perspective. But currently what we have seen that there is no ADA related issues currently at this time. And I don't believe that we will see it. But again, one of the things is that we will continue to do is monitor that throughout the clinical development phase and even after post-marketing, which will be also required from a regulatory perspective.
Thank you very much, Wei Jie. Thanks, Juan Carlos. I think someone is asking about mix and match of vaccines, and we talked about that, especially with boosters, where they are concerned. So Nithi Sivakumar says, how much do we know about the interactions and AEs between different vaccines in a mix and match setting? Is this data seen to be robust? I think before people consider a new vaccine to match with what they've already had, they are probably going to wonder about these things as well moving forward.
That's a great question. I mean, there has been small studies that have been conducted, and data is out there looking at specifically the safety perspective, especially in when you are mix and matching. But so far, there has been no major safety signals at all. We do see that sometimes there are less side effects from using one or another vaccine from a technology perspective. But it's correct, more data is needed, more additional trials are needed. And that's something that, for example, with our VLA 2001 inactivated vaccines, it's one of our major focuses in our clinical trials. And especially we are monitoring individuals up to 12 to 18 months after the individuals have been vaccinated their third time as a booster, for example.
All right. Thanks, Nithi. Thanks, Juan Carlos. I'm just going to pull up a question from Chester Drum. Just a bit of declaration of conflict of interest. This is my husband, but he's also a medical professional and he's tuning in. Do you foresee China being open to external vaccine suppliers given some of the challenges with the domestic vaccines? I think we also wanted to talk about how different your vaccine is compared to some of the Chinese vaccines. So maybe this is also a good follow-on question.
Yeah, so coming back to China's willingness and ability to allow other vaccines, I think that for me, I don't see an issue. Again, it's governmental policy, and I will not comment to that. But looking and at least trying to provide here a bit of clarity of, for example, the Chinese vaccines compared to Valneva's vaccine, VLA 2001, the differences is that we have an additional adjuvant, which is CpG 1018, which is a toll-like receptor. This adjuvant has been used in other vaccines, for example, in hepatitis B vaccines, which is also approved. And we do believe that this additional adjuvant has allowed us to obtain the results that we were able to share from our phase 3 pivotal trial, where we had a superiority for VLA 2001 compared to the AstraZeneca AZD 1222. So again, I think that's one of the major, I would say, differentiations that we have compared to the Chinese vaccine.
Thanks for sharing. And also thanks, Chester, for showing up. I've got an interesting question, and I think you can answer this. Anonymous asks, will the pandemic to endemic transition for COVID-19 lead to the vaxplosion? First time I've heard of this phrase, vax explosion of many different types of vaccines out there. What do you think, Juan Carlos? I suspect so, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And basically, we also saw when we had the first pandemic, well, not the first pandemic, I'm sorry, the H1N1 back in 2009, I recall, where there was more interest from governments in stockpiling, for example. They wanted to have more technologies for vaccines. They wanted to, vaccine companies to develop new vaccines for new diseases. And I think this is what we'll see, hopefully, the enthusiasm of the need of vaccine and bringing new products to market to make sure that we were able to combat, in a prophylactic matter, vaccines that can prevent either pandemics or endemics moving ahead in the future.
Wow, I like the sound of it, endemic. Okay, I have a medical writer. I've chatted with him before, Dominic Ho, PhD. From Valneva's perspective, okay, this is a bit of a science communication question. From Valneva's perspective, what are some of the ways in which the company can push back? I think this is about, general public outreach and education on some of the negative press surrounding COVID-19 vaccination in general. I think this is also something that governments grapple with and health ministries everywhere are dealing with. What are your thoughts on this, Juan Carlos?
Well, since my experience and my time in vaccines development, we're always going to have vaccine hesitation individuals that do not believe in vaccination. I do believe I wouldn't say too much of a pushback. Again, I do see that with COVID-19, science will prevail. What we have to take into consideration that for 2 years now, we have seen now rates. We are at around 485 million COVID cases that have been identified worldwide, and I think we are at 6.13 million deaths. I do believe is that if we were not able to move as quick to develop the vaccines that are currently in mass vaccination programs, our death rates would probably be higher significantly. I cannot estimate a number, but we don't want to have a situation back as we did in 1918 with the Spanish flu, where around 50 million individuals worldwide died from that. So again, we will always have individuals that will be hesitant to vaccinations, but I do believe that with the current vaccination strategies, the current development, the quick access to vaccines that can protect from severe disease and hospitalizations and death, I think we've been able to show that vaccine and vaccine administration is important from a public health perspective.
Thanks, Dominic, for sharing your thoughts. Okay, we have two questions that are both quite similar. Richard, thanks for asking so many questions. Keep it going. Currently, VLA 2001 is only available in Bahrain. When will your inactivated vaccine be available in other parts of the world, in Asia in particular? Also, next question, similar. Sven says, do you plan on filing for approval in Japan for your COVID-19 vaccines? I think both questions ask about your plan in Asia in particular.
Yeah, so regarding the availability of VLA 2001, yes, it's correct. Bahrain was the first country that have approved under emergency use authorization VLA 2001. But at the same time, we've been in the process now with a rolling review and rolling submission both in UK and also in EMA. We are, of course, speaking with additional governments worldwide, also in Asia Pacific, where we will be initiating our regulatory submission package, as some of these countries do sometimes require approval from either an FDA, an MHRA, or an EMA, for example. But our plans is to submit our regulatory dossiers in countries where the governments and individuals are interested in a product like VLA 2001, the inactivated.
Well, I hope you have some success, of course, in this part of the world where I live. I'm just going to bring up this question. I'm not sure how relevant and if you have any experience, and if not, just let me know. Jay Chandran asks about your views on nasal vaccines. I know VLA 2001 is not a nasal vaccine. I believe the Indian vaccine manufacturer Bharat Biotech is making great progress with this format of vaccine. Again, just curious if you have any experience or thoughts on nasal vaccines.
Yeah, so nasal vaccines, this mode of administration has been proven, for example, in flu, which actually being distributed from a flu vaccination on a yearly basis in the US, for example, and that's how I have experience on that. I do believe that from a development perspective, every company needs to look at new modes of administration. I believe that the nasal vaccines can be a potential contributor, I would say another tool to combat COVID-19. But there are other countries, companies and countries also developing. Bharat, I am aware of. I know there's also additional countries looking into this type of modes of administration. And of course, at Valneva, we are open to any collaborations or any new routes of administration. So again, it comes back of what is needed, and of course how fast can we get these new modes of administration to the market.
All right, thanks, Jay. I wish them luck with the nasal vaccine. I mean, my children had quite a challenge getting injected. It would be much easier if we could only do it nasally, right? Sven is back. Is VLA 2001 the first vaccine that has been developed in-house? Can you use the adjuvant and know how to develop influenza vaccines? I think, maybe Juan Carlos, this is also a good time for you to share about other vaccines in the portfolio, in the pipeline, and also, I guess, whether it can be used to make a flu vaccine.
Yeah. So no, great question. So Valneva and Juliana, you mentioned it. We are a specialized vaccine company. Actually, we have developed our chikungunya vaccine from scratch, all the way from bench to now showing positive phase 3 results for our chikungunya in our pivotal phase 3 trial, and we're moving forward for BLA and EMA submission later this year. And we've also had the opportunity to develop also in-house our Lyme disease vaccines, which we've aligned and co-development and commercialization with Pfizer, which we also looking into moving into a phase 3 program, hopefully in Q3 of this year. And VLA 2001, as I mentioned, is also something that we took our existing platform and technology, which we're using for Ixiaro, our Japanese encephalitis, and we just transferred that into our know-how, and of course, with different internal discussions and strategy meetings, and advice from our scientific advisory board, we decided to include 2 adjuvants. Valneva is not, we don't look into the flu market, but of course, this is something that we need to think about in the future if there will be a need of a combo flu COVID vaccine. But again, it's a bit too early to think about this, where we just to make sure that we can provide VLA 2001 to the people who need it the most at this time.
All right, thanks, Sven. So at this point, we are coming to the end. We probably can take 2 to 3 more questions. So please put them in the comments. I have one question that is actually very interesting. I'm searching for it. Okay, it's from Billy Teo. Hi, Billy. I know Billy in real life. Given our current experience with COVID-19, how ready is the world to deal with disease X? I think we've used the word disease X to describe a future pandemic. Bill Gates has of course told us that this is not going to be the last one, and that they will come more fast and furious in the next decades to come. So I think this is more of a kind of a futuristic question, a bit more speculative. What do you think, Juan Carlos, about what we've learned so far and what we're going to use and apply that to disease X in the future, assuming it's also infectious like COVID-19?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And of course, I think that COVID-19, I wouldn't go too much to the extent that it was a wake-up call. I think from a scientific perspective, and as you mentioned, there's been a lot of talks scientifically that we were waiting for the next pandemic. The question will always be in what sequence or how long would it be? But I think it brings up more awareness of the need to start preparing for the next potential outbreak. And I think this is where governments now are reshifting funding in order to create, for example, in Europe, the HERA organization. US also has BARDA, for example. But again, I think it's more around making sure that we have the appropriate resources, but also the appropriate capacity and capability. And I think that's the only way that we can really prepare for disease X around that. I think COVID-19, as you probably are aware of, actually there had been early development for a corona virus. It wasn't specific to 19, but there were already small studies that were being conducted from our MERS days, our SARS days, and so forth. So it comes into more making sure that we can continue funding these early, let's say, trials or experiments in order to start and be prepared for the next disease X.
You mentioned SARS. Of course, this is SARS-CoV-2. We were pretty scarred by SARS over here in Singapore and many countries in Asia. It was many people still remember how badly it hit our economy then. Of course, COVID-19 is worse, but it was pretty shocking to all of us here. So let me ask you a science communication question, and this is something, of course, that I'm very interested in. It's a bit long. Eddie Lim asks, I noticed that as our vaccine technology continues to improve, the level of scientific literacy and understanding required to properly understand how they work is gradually moving further and further away from the general public, and this gives room for misinformation to take place. What are your views on this? The technology is pretty complicated, and we are asked to almost take like go to the supermarket and take a pick of which vaccine we want. I'm not sure we have that kind of that knowledge or deep understanding of infectious disease and vaccination to make that call. I think Eddie is right. I see that in my own social networks and family circles. What do you think, Juan Carlos?
So again, I'm not going to comment on how other companies have to do, let's say, medical education or disease
Yes.
awareness and so forth. But VLA and for Valneva, this is something that we take at heart. I totally agree that if you don't explain your technology, there's going to be more hesitancy. There is also room for more misinformation. So this is something that we take very seriously at Valneva, where we make sure that we have the appropriate scientific advisory boards, but we also try to inform the individuals with the relevant information around our technology. I mean, Valneva, we have an agnostic approach, meaning that we don't only focus on inactivated technology. We also have our live attenuated, which is our VLA 1553, our chikungunya vaccine. And we have also a subunit vaccine, which is the VLA 15, our Lyme disease, which we've partnered with Pfizer. So again, it's how let's administer the message to make sure that the platforms and the technology can be explained and with, of course, with data, show that there are less concerns in one area or the other.
All right. I wasn't going to pull this up, but as a PhD myself, I'm not a medical professional. I'm a scientist. I'm just gonna bring this up by some anonymous who says, "What is the need for basic science in vaccine development?" Of course, this is truistic. We need lots of basic science that has led to applied research. But did you see any such very strong relationship between some basic discoveries and your work at Valneva, and of course previously in different companies?
So, coming from a point in different companies, I think one of the things that I've learned, and also my experience, that we don't know it all. The immune system is so complex that we believe that we have identified, some issues in order to then come over the hurdle of development of a new vaccine. But again, it comes to the point of where the science also needs to be translated in order to the individuals to understand, what are the key principles, for example, of immunology, especially, for example, the other question that came, the mode of administration is a nasal patch or an intramuscular vaccine. What is the best way in order to make sure that we could activate the immune system in order to adapt itself to fight off any diseases? So it's a great question, but what I can say, and from my experience, I'm learning something new every day, and I don't think that we'll be able to find the answers for everything.
All right, thanks, Anonymous. I'm just going to hide this comment. And, at this point, we've already come to the end of our questions from the audience. And Juan Carlos, you did a very good job, actually, and responding to all of them in rapid fire from mix and match, booster strategies to basic science to approvals in different parts of Asia. You did a really wonderful job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And on that note, thank you for joining me as a guest on my LinkedIn Live. Let me give you a nice thank you note from me. And on a personal note, I heard that you might be interested to visit us in Singapore. I hope to see you very soon because we are now open for business again. No quarantines, no ART testing, just some pre-departure PCR tests, and you should be fit to travel.
Yes.
So
yes.
thank you so much, Juan Carlos. Thank you, everyone. Signing out from Singapore.
Thank you very
Thank you
much,
so
Juliana.
much.
Thank you, everyone. It's great. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.